For decades, hunters with big enough bravery have pursued North America's big boars. We're talking bears on Kodiak Island, the Alaska Peninsula, with a couple classic medium boars.
338 Winchester Magnum and 375 Holland Holland Magnum.
Welcome to Cartridge Talks. Whoa. On this episode of Cartridge Talks, we have two Winchester Model 70s, one chambered in 375 H&H, the other 338 Win Mag.
Mark and I have two bullet offerings from the Nosler Company, AccuBonds and E-tips for each respective cartridge. We're going to be firing them into gel at 20 and 100 yards, crunching some numbers, and hopefully trying to crown a winner.
Let's get to shooting.
Next up at 20 yards, the 260 grain E-tip out of the 375 H&H.
There she goes. And that may be why you shoot a 375. Well, Ryan, I think you got it. Yes, the block is absent from the table. Let's get this guy flipped around. That was something.
It was dramatic. I'm going to call that 34 and a half.
Okay. Ryan, what we just witnessed, I think, is an argument for energy.
It's a 100-pound block, and it moved over there. Significant.
Significant.
Let's do it again.
Let's go. Next up for the 338, the Nosler E-tip, a 225 grainer, 20 yards. Ooh, whoa. Let's see what that is. Close to 37. That's pretty cool.
I think that would stop a big critter.
I mean, that's a lot of what you're looking for is that penetration. Permanent wound cavity appears to be not as big, but I don't know. It's still a big bullet, going fast, going far.
That's true. We're at 20 yards with the 375 H&H and the 300 grain AccuBond.
You know it's good when it makes you giggle.
And it makes the block jiggle.
It certainly does. Let's go look at this thing. Just a violent reaction. It appears to actually have a somewhat larger permanent wound cavity, maybe about the same.
We're gonna go with, 34 and a half. Let me read that one more time. Shop class teacher would be disappointed. 34 and a half. Yowza. Yeah, that is a straight line.
That'll do.
Yep.
338 Win Mag, 225 grain AccuBond, 20 yards. All right, Ryan, let's see what the old 338 did.
Pretty darn good, I'd say.
Yeah, solid penetration. I thought it did a real nice job overall.
Yeah, let's get a measurement on that.
32 inches on the button.
I'd say that would handle a moose or a bear.
Very impressive.
Any plains game you pointed it at. Next up at the 100-yard line, the 260 grain E-tip from Nosler out of the 375 H&H. All right, little block. Good luck.
It is just equally impressive every time.
That one seemed more so.
You want me to straighten it out a little bit?
No, just let me get a good eyeball on this mark here. We're gonna call that 35 and a half.
Everybody likes that.
Yeah, aside from my irreparable flinch at the time of trigger pull, I'm very impressed with this. This E-tip is a mean bullet. It's leaving very quickly. It's like 2750 average.
I mean, think about that, 2750 for a 260 grain projectile.
Yes. Let's do more.
Let's. Next up, out of our classic 338 Win Mag, the 225 grain E-tip. 100 yards, let's see how it does.
Mark, that was authoritative.
I think I pulled that shot a little bit though. Ryan, that one had a little bit of a, gave it kind of the old 375 effect, at least the way it lifted the block
That's
up.
that copper, baby.
Definitely shaded left on the impact. I mean, honestly, Ryan, 37 and a half.
I'll take it, Mark. We're at 100 yards with a 375 H&H firing the 300 grain Nosler AccuBond.
My goodness.
It still hits with incredible authority. 28.5. A little bit shorter than the close range target, but nonetheless.
Look at that expansion.
That is a large projectile. The white plastic tip is perfectly intact right there. That's fun. That's a honker.
I can see why people use these.
Yep.
All right, we got the 338. We're at a distance of 100 yards, and this is the 225 grain AccuBond.
Big jello piece, Mark.
Thank you, Ryan.
Yep. Got him.
Ugh. That is not pleasant.
That's a great sound by just.
Ugh. Hey, where'd she go? Why am I missing it?
Right there.
Oh, there it is. There's a smudge there. What are we looking at? 29?
We'll call it 28.5.
28.5? Okay. Man. Violent.
That's a lot of horsepower. Bullet is not quite inverted, but close.
Cool stuff.
That's pretty neat. Next.
That's the last one.
Oh. Okay.
Other things.
Okay. Welcome to the analytics portion of today's episode of Cartridge Talks.
Ryan, we've been testing two classic medium bores, purpose-built for taking big bores, but which one is better? That is the question.
Mark, what are we working with here today?
Ryan, in front of you, you have the venerable 375 Holland and Holland. And in front of me, the 338 Winchester.
Both chambered in Winchester, model 70s, in fact. Modern model 70s.
Topped with a Viper HD 2-10. I know it's one of your favorites.
It's one of the finest rifle scopes we make.
Securing the scopes to these fine rifles, Ryan, we have our precision matched rings. Just an absolute lovely package altogether.
I agree.
So Ryan, what were we pushing through these rifles today?
Two offerings from the Nosler Ammunition Company. An interesting thing about these two cartridges in particular, for their time, they represented the pinnacle of Magnum performance. Today, there's not a lot of offerings out there. In fact, 338 Win Mag has 15 factory offerings from the big six that we usually audit. 375 H&H, 3 more with 18. It seems, I don't want to say that they're on their way out, but my gosh, that's not a lot of factory ammunition offerings.
Well, and there's not a lot of rifles offered, factory rifles offered in these two cartridges either. Like, it was even a little bit troublesome trying to find these two.
Yeah, really interesting thing. I'm reminded of something that you had said once though, Mark, about cartridge availability, and that a cartridge isn't necessarily super viable if it has less than some amount of factory offerings. It's the right bullet, the right style of bullet for the application. Both of the offerings that we did, we had AccuBonds and E-tips in the respective chamberings, cover you down on everything from plains game in Africa to big brown bears, as you were mentioning, or anything else in between. So maybe this is just a case of we've got the right bullet, the right cartridge or chambering rather, and we don't need 100 different offerings.
I think you nailed it. I mean, these are purpose built for a very specific application. Big critters,
Yep.
hit hard,
Yep.
drive deep,
Yeah.
put them down.
Yeah.
Ryan, when it comes to recoil, you were somewhat insistent that I fire the 338 today, which I think is somewhat counterintuitive because the 375 is bigger.
That is correct, Mark.
Why is that?
Now, the two rifles are set up very similar. There's subtle differences between them in stock dimension, a little bit of mass difference, but not a heck of a lot. And there is something to that. This is something I've heard my entire career, I suppose, is that 338 is a fast, kind of a hard punch. 375 H&H is like a big, slow push.
Mm-hmm.
Now, despite some opinions on both of these being some sluggish, slow, hard hitters, both cartridges are actually quite fantastic at distance. especially the 338 Win Mag and the lighter loading offering in the 375. Pretty slippery bullets, pretty high BC. So we're going to examine the E-tip data for this part of the analysis. And so both of these are homogeneous bullet designs. The 338 Win Mag is a 225 grain. The 375 H&H is a 260 grain.
I'm glad you brought that up, Ryan. Neither of these cartridges are known as long-range bombers, but you start crunching their numbers with the old geoballistics, they might surprise you.
So let's start with the 338 Win Mag. Using today's environmentals powered by geoballistics, at 500 yards, the 225 E-tip requires 9.4 MOA of drop. Pretty flat, honest to goodness. At 500 yards, it's retaining about 2050 in feet per second, and is giving us 2,100 foot-pounds of energy. That'll take just about anything you pointed at.
It certainly will, and we're talking about 500 yards, Ryan. Most critters are shot 500 yards and in. These things are excellent cartridges for big bears, but when we talk in the context of your general big game rifle for elk and deer, they're going to do that too.
Absolutely. Now moving on to the 375 H&H, and again, this is a 260 grain E-tip. At 500 yards, we need 10.3 MOA of drop, so not quite as flat. We're carrying 1,881 feet per second and about 2040 for foot-pounds of energy. Again, this is a 500-yard cartridge. And in fact, Mark, you may recall when you were going on that moose hunt and we were trying to pick cartridges of all the different offerings on the table, 375 H&H was a top contender.
It really was. You know, at the end of the day, I ended up going with the 300 short mag. It's a rifle that I was familiar with. Again, looking at the numbers and the situations we were likely going to be in, it was going to do everything I needed it to do with gusto.
And not only just for moose, but in case you ran into one of those really big brown bears.
This is true. Now that we've covered drop and drift of these fine cartridges, let's see how they did in gel.
The Jello. We're at the point of this production in which we start Jello shots.
Let's party, Ryan. In front of you, Ryan, you have the 260 grain E-tip. How did it do?
Mark, it went almost through the entire block, leaving about 5 inches on the table. 35.5 inches of penetration through this gigantic piece of gel.
Absolutely incredible. I had a 225 grain E-tip out of the 338, giving me 37.5 inches of penetration. Incredibly impressive for both, and I will note, we don't have the 20-yard gel blocks in front of us because the performance was nearly identical at 20 and 100 yards. So we saved a little time and effort and just put the 100-yard blocks up here.
Now, of course, the E-tip being a homogeneous bullet, it's going to yield higher penetration values, right? It's solid, well, it's gilding metal, not solid copper. This would be an exceptional choice in both options if you're one looking to flatten a little bit of trajectory in your 375 H&H, or take on the heaviest, biggest boned critter in your 338, or both.
The E-tips performed incredible. But now let's take a look at our old friend, the AccuBond. New bullets, new grain weight for you, Ryan.
300.
That's a big pill.
It's a grande.
How did it do?
25 inches of penetration through the clear ballistics gel.
No flies on that.
Nope, big permanent wound cavity. Some fragmentation, but this is an expectation we would have out of a bullet like an AccuBond. Huge frontal diameter. It's like a parasail going through the gelatin.
Yeah, that is incredibly impressive. Out of the 338, 225 grains again for me. Some material loss up front. Pretty darn good penetration, 28.5 inches. I think they'd certainly do the job.
Mark, you like these AccuBonds, don't you?
You know, I do, Ryan. I've used them a fair amount in the field, knocked down a bunch of critters with them. They've always done the job I need them to do. You know, looking at the penetration in the wound cavity, I'd say maybe the E-tip outshines it a little bit, considering the job that I want this thing to do.
I suppose it depends on what you're doing, and if the context is large bears, carnivores, things with teeth and claws that will tear you to shreds, yeah, I'd probably be a little more inclined to punch through as much bone, hide, muscle as I can. However, the AccuBond, with a very high BC, pretty slippery profile, rapid expansion, I mean, for elk and mule deer and plains game, you know, maybe non-dangerous critters, whatever shoots the best, I think, is the play there.
Yeah, I certainly think so as well. Yeah, they're a really cool bullet. Like you said, they have a lot of very positive attributes. And you can look at the analytics here and be like, oh, we have hard data. But when you have a lot of hard field data of critters at your feet, you can't deny that either.
Well, I reckon in true Cartridge Talks fashion, we ought to like crown a winner, pick a winner, chicken dinner kind of thing. I don't know.
I think I do, actually. I mean, I really like both of them a lot. I feel like it's a darn shame that they're somewhat declining in popularity. I think bullet technology is part of the reasoning behind that. You can do a lot with a modern bullet with maybe a lesser powerful cartridge. Less powerful. Either way, both of these are great cartridges. If I had to pick one, I'm going with the 375.
My man, after my own heart. I think so too, and I probably just because of romance and then the fact that like 375 in a lot of the African countries that offer big game hunting, or excuse me, dangerous game hunting, that's the minimum caliber.
Right.
So if I'm going to try to skin the versatility cat, it has it. Now, the 338's numbers don't lie, and in fact, retained energy and velocity at 500 yards, the 338 wins that race. There's a lot to be said for a cartridge that can push like a 300 grain solid, and I'm talking like a dangerous game solid through 3 feet of Cape Buffalo. Not that you need it, but it's there when you go.
For what I'm going to use a cartridge like this for, I'm going to lean towards the one that's going to push a bigger pill, better. And like you said, it gives you that versatility if you did want to go do dangerous game in Africa, or even if I was just going to do plains game in Africa. I kind of want to be toting a 375, just cause.
I'm with you. No shade on the 338. Fine cartridge. Not for me.
375?
375.
Well, the shooting has stopped, Ryan, but my love affair with these cartridges hasn't. Had a lot of fun today.
Mark, that was touching. I also did. How's your shoulder?
You know, it's surprisingly fine. I think we maybe overestimate what these are going to do to a person.
Mark handles recoil well.
Well, that's a very fine compliment.
Yeah, so I think for me, the 375. I think for you, the 375. The 338 is an incredible cartridge. Its reputation stands.
It certainly does, and I almost hate to pick one. I mean, growing up my entire life, man, if you needed an elk gun or a bear gun, this was the one to get, at least in North America.
There's still a great deal of romance, and that's what's got me maybe a little biased towards the 375 H&H. It is a practical cartridge as well.
It certainly is. Ryan, there's only one thing left to do, and that's for you folks to tune in to the Vortex Nation podcast, where Ryan and I dive deeper into the gel and discuss these cartridges and rifles in further detail.
We'll see you on the next one.